Hello, this is Dale Matthews. This is Inside News. Mike will be joining us early next week. So, as I was talking about last night, it's simply not true that there's something that totally wrong all the time about county government or even Grants Pass city government. It's not true. There are good people who work in county government. Not enough, according to my way of thinking, but there are good people. For every Scott Chansey in transportation, unfortunately, however, there is a Larry Graves airports manager. For every Nate Gowie-Ran, who's with Community Corrections, you've got a J.C.A. Schofield, who's the HR director. For every Tricia Myers, the great county clerk that we have now, there's an Arthur O'Hare from the finance department. It's not true that there's nothing good that's happening in county government. It's just simply not true. And I've said several times, it is very much like a vat of vanilla ice cream. There are things that Larry Graves does that are good at the airport. But then there's that chocolate swirl, that fudge swirl in the middle. But it's not fudge. And so if you wish to eat that, go right ahead, but I wouldn't want to. So what do you do about this? You can, as I did at the beginning, I would go in and see my county commissioner, and I would say, here's a concern that I have. They encourage you to do so, or to call them, and to come by anonymously, or to drop by secretly, or without making a big fuss about it. This is the way to handle things. You should do it that way, unless you just don't get any results, which I wasn't getting, and a number of people aren't getting. I gave up trying to communicate with them secretly because afterwards I found in several instances they would insist that the conversation never took place. Now what are you supposed to do? So putting it in writing is a real good idea. Except we weren't getting any responses, especially in some of the stuff about Larry Graves and the airports and etc. And putting in a request for information is a good idea until it's required by law that they respond to you within 5 working days. Then they handed it over to county legal counsel, and I told you his last response to me was, you don't want that information. So he's blocking it. Blocking something that's required by state law. That's our county legal counsel not responding, saying, well, you don't want that. You can't even request. I mean, you can request it. My case, you're just not going to get it. It doesn't matter that it flies in the face of state law. It doesn't matter that there are penalties for such a thing. Who's going to hold our county legal counsel responsible for obeying the law? It's not going to happen. We did finally, after a number of violations, we did get some response from the Oregon Government Ethics Commission, but the Keith Heck says, yeah, that's really nothing. Yeah. I think that the only response is to get rid of these guys. But there is something else that you can do. You can complain to your neighbors. You can watch the show. You could get up at a weekly business session and talk and say, here's what we found out. Now, you're not going to get this in the Daily Courier because they're not going to cover most of this stuff. You can forget about KJO. You can forget about the sneak preview. You can forget about the IV News. They're not going to carry these stories. The media in this area, that one story I was telling you about where the commissioners had decided they were going to spend economic development money on making themselves look good, or there was the one where the treasurer said that we're going to be taking in marijuana tax money here locally and laundering it. She did say that. That's how it's laundered. So the couple of the TV stations said, well, that's outrageous, but they're not going to run the story. Don't be insane. We're not going to run a story, even with videotape of her saying that. And with the commissioners just sitting there going, they're not going to run this story. We do. I do. This site does. but nobody else is going to. What, are you crazy? They're not going to tell you about what's happening in the area. The last time the commissioners were on KJO, they spent, it seemed like, about a third to a half of the program talking about, they were prompted by the guy at KJO saying, well, tell us all the happy, good things. Many of them are under the radar, you know. So it's going to make me look, especially me, look like, oh, you've got nothing but complaints. I just started off by saying there are some good people that work here, that work for the county. But occasionally there are things that happen. You knew it had to happen. It was coming. Occasionally there are things that are happening. You're saying to yourself, what? What in the world are they doing? One of the reasons you watch this show is to see what in the world are they doing. Here's a good example, and then I'm going to have a few comments. Oh, really? Mm-hmm.
We are going to have a public hearing this morning, so I am calling the public hearing to order, 9:06 a.m. This is the public hearing on the Josephine County budget for fiscal year 2016-17. And I think we have Mr. O'Hare, our finance director, here to give us a brief presentation about our county budget.
Thank you and good morning. Arthur O'Hare, Finance Director for Josephine County.
Now, I know you've seen a lot about the budget. You haven't seen this presentation on this show because this was the grand summary of everything that went before. Okay, so one last shot at the county budget. Here's Arthur O'Hare, the Finance Director, giving us the final coding.
In accordance with the Oregon budget law, I'm going to go over a brief timeline, just very brief, to let you know, let the public know the process here.
See this lady holding her nose just behind him? Well, that's Jan Ford. She's important to further stories. Larry Ford is the big guy in the white t-shirt, and he's the one that got up recently and said that this Board of Commissioners is the best Board of Commissioners from the last 5 or 6 sets of commissioners, which would make it the best set of commissioners for up to a quarter of a century that these guys are. And Jan Ford is the one that said about this show that you're now watching that the website on which it is running does not exist. Not that it's not a website, it simply doesn't exist. That's Jan Ford. But here, let's get back to Arthur O'Hare.
So in accordance with Oregon budget law, I, as the budget officer, prepared fiscal year 2016-17 budget following the direction of the Board of County Commissioners. The law requires that I present a balanced budget to the Budget Committee and that the Budget Committee review the presented budget.
Sorry about the sound on this, by the way, but this is the county sound. This is what you spent tens and tens of thousands of dollars on. This is the best sound that the county, it does sound like somebody's in the background hitting Morse code, doesn't it? This is the very best sound that the county can provide for the little recording that they do on the side. We do try to do better here, and there is yet another source. If we take it off the video that they produce, it's a convoluted process, but this is the official audio recording as supplied by the county. Sorry about it. You just have to overlook the crazy sounds. Sorry.
So on April 19th, on April 26th, and on May 17th of this year, the Budget Committee met to review the budget. And on May 17th, the Budget Committee approved the proposed budget without any changes. Oregon budget law requires that we publish the approved budget, which we did in the Daily Courier on May 20th, setting a public hearing for today. And the purpose of today's public hearing is to hear any citizen input on the budget that was approved by the Budget Committee. After the public hearing is closed, the Board of Commissioners may make additional adjustments to the approved budget based on input from the citizens. Before June 30th, the budget law requires that the Board of Commissioners adopt the budget, make appropriations, and set the property tax rate.
Now, just very important to this piece of video, and you can always watch this without any commentary if that's what you wish. Important thing is he said the budget has been approved without changes, and after this meeting and a little bit more public input, that the commissioners can make further adjustments. Well, those two statements don't match very well, do they? If there was without changes, then they could make adjustments for the very first time. But he's saying there have been no changes and the commissioners can make further adjustments. Sounds like a small point. You'll see my point in a moment.
I'd like to let folks know that copies of the approved budget and of our audited financial statements are available on the county website. So the budget you have before you is the budget as approved by the Budget Committee. And any questions before we go to the...
Any questions from the board?
When you say it was, this budget is presented as without any changes from what had been previously.
Correct.
So does that include my changes?
The salary issue is not part of the budget total itself. So that's a different issue. Your changes are your changes, but the budget itself is still at the same dollar amount. The Budget Committee did not approve specific salaries of specific people. But that's not their approval process. And that's not the budget process. That's the Elected Official Compensation Committee and the elected official compensation. But that's
Okay, let's see if we got this guy right. Take it to everyday life. You go down to the supermarket and you've got a list of things that you would like to buy, you would like to accomplish. And while you're down there, you see some point of purchase advertising things and you decide to pick up some items that are not on your list. Let's suppose, for example, that you had 5 of one and then you decide to add in another, and so you just get 4 of those and get that other thing. The amount of money that you spend is the same, but you have changed what the outcome is. According to Arthur O'Hare, there's been no change. Well, because you're spending the same amount of money, and so there's been no change to the budget. No change to the budget. You've just spent the same amount of money, but you spend it on different things. That's no change to the budget. And Keith Eck is saying, wait a minute, there were changes. No, there's no changes. Wait a minute, we've got this on videotape. Oh, no, you don't. No, there's no changes. Why is it important that there's no changes? Because there's a lot longer process if there's going to be changes. So, by definition, there must not be any changes. And if Arthur O'Hare says there's no changes, no matter who asks, there are no changes. And don't ask again.
the budget is at the same dollar
Whoops.
amount.
The Budget Committee approved 4-2,
Correct.
the proposal that I had made.
But that did not change the dollar amount of
The
the
total,
budget.
I understand
The total
that.
dollar of the budget, correct. And that's what what the public hearing is about today, is the total budget, total dollar amount.
But wouldn't those recommendations be forwarded to us, or where is that process? I think for Commissioner Heck's point of view, he's interested in that being ratified by the board.
Right, it would, at some point, and I haven't put it together yet for presentation to the board, but it would be effective July 1, which is the August 7th pay date. So it's not as if, something's going to happen tomorrow that would influence that one way or another.
In other words, for clarification, is that the salary request made by Commissioner Heck,
Right.
the whole elected official salary compensation board and recommendation is a separate process from the budget that will be handled separately. And of course, time is not of the essence necessarily, because that can be implemented in a week or 2 weeks or whatever,
Right.
because it wouldn't go on.
Okay, so does this mean Peggy Goodwin, who made this effort to try to get some money into the hands of the sheriff's department, And they shut it down every possible permutation. They said, no, we're not going to give any more money to the sheriff's department. Stop asking. This is not I'm paraphrasing, this is not a property tax. We're not going to do it. Only property taxes will be passed by this budget committee. I'm paraphrasing again. We are not going to give any more money to the sheriff's department, and it doesn't matter that we've said that it's an emergency. Okay. If her suggestions had been adopted by them, any of them, why, that would still not be $1.5 million. That wouldn't be any change to the budget. Oh, no, 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 no. See, because $1.5 million was going to go and be put aside for public works. And now $1.5 million would go to the sheriff's department, which some people feel is a bigger emergency than public works. But there's no change to the budget, you see, because it's the same amount of money. And there's no change to the budget. What the heck are you talking about? There's no change to the budget. And you can see, except for Cheryl explaining it, and let's count how many times she has to clarify what it is that Arthur O'Hare is saying. The commissioner's going to like, what?
Back until July 1st, it's not necessary under the law for us to approve a budget, correct?
Correct, because the budget today, the budget committee did not change the total dollar amount of the budget. It's still the 90 million.
They made a policy recommendation,
Right.
and this is the dollar amount of the budget.
Of the total budget,
So that-
correct.
So the difference is that they had made a policy recommendation that we can handle next week or the week after, but the dollar amount of the budget does not change.
It's the same thing with the adjustments that the budget committee recommended regarding the, I believe, the assessor 3%, the sheriff 6%, the legal counsel 2%. The recommendations for the salary changes are still valid and still in effect, but they did not change the dollar total of the budget.
Okay, all right. So all these people get raises, and the commissioners voted on it. They said, yes, we're going to do this. But there's no changes to the budget, you see, even though people are getting raises and money is moving around from here to there. That's not a change in the budget, not by Arthur O'Hare's definition of a change in the budget. There must not be a change to the budget. It's a lot of extra work for the finance department. Therefore, no matter what you say, no matter what common sense says, no matter what the commissioners ask, there's no changes to the budget. Read my lips. No change. That's the kind of government we have.
So the budget stands as it was approved.
So when is that process?
Good question.
And I understand we only have the discretion to ratify their recommendation. We don't actually have the authority to change it. Is that true? Or I don't want to get sidetracked in something, but I think maybe the answer is on, June 12th or whatever, we are going
Right.
to address the issue of the recommendation from the Elected Officials Compensation Committee.
Right. I think what we're dealing with specifically with Commissioner Heck's reduction in budget, or reduction
Whoops.
in salary, not in budget per se. The board always has the discretion to spend less, or any department has discretion to spend less than what has been appropriated. So that's not the question at this point. Can you spend less? Yes, you can. Do you have to spend the full amount? No, you don't. So that's,
In other words, what you're saying, for further clarification, is that we're approving the budget today
yes,
as it was passed by the Budget Committee, because the Budget Committee did not make any motions to alter the amount, the dollar amount of the budget.
correct.
They made motions and passed
Yes,
two in regards to salary, Commissioner Heck and then the other elected officials, having all to do with elected officials as a policy matter that we have to take up separately from the budget dollar amount.
Sure.
It would have been different had the Budget Committee made a motion to adjust for salaries in that, correct?
correct. Yes. And then what you would have before you today would have been the adjusted total budget. But since we did not adjust the budget for those recommendations, the budget is what it is.
So you decide to go through your house or your apartment and move everything from one location to another. Everything is different. You even move the refrigerator. Everything inside there is different. But it's the same box. Therefore, there's been no changes made. Because the box is still there. Or maybe using that box analogy, you decide that you're going to open up that Christmas present, take out the present that's in there, put in a brand new kind of present, seal it back up. There's no changes made to the box. So it's the same present as it always was. That might be going a little too far in the analogy, but I mean, there's no changes to the budget. It's all the money could be changed around 6 ways from Sunday, but there's no change to the budget. Just so get that straight, get with the program. There's no changes.
Still not addressing his original question is when
Yeah,
are we going
when
to
are
take
we
that
going
issue?
to do that? Not today.
Okay.
Is that, not right now.
But before July 1.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I'm just asking.
Correct.
I'm just asking. Okay.
No, you don't.
That'll be board level. He'll get that ready. Bring
And
it
that's
to the
not this,
board.
yeah, that's not this process that we're doing today. Today, we published the budget, the approved budget, as it was approved by the Budget Committee. According to Oregon budget law, that's the budget that we publish in the newspaper, what the Budget Committee approved. And then that's the discussion that we're having today is the approved budget.
Oh my gosh, can you imagine what would happen if the budget committee's changes were talked about? Then you would have to take that approved budget. Remember, they had said to the various departments, including the sheriff's department, way back over almost a year ago, that you will maintain a status quo budget. Then what they'd have to do, imagine the amount of work that this county employee would have to do on changing the budget to reflect reality. So it has to equal the same amount as ever before with no changes, even though the commissioners have said, hey, wait a minute. What do you mean there's no changes? Ask Cheryl Walker. She'll explain it all to you. So I got up at that meeting and I spoke out. Wouldn't you? What do you mean there's no changes? This flies in the face of common sense. There's a lot of that going on recently. So it looks like today's show is going to end up sort of being the Dale show, because most of the time, as you know, with Mike, every week I say something about what's going on with the county, because I think it's important to do so. If you don't speak up, then what else are you going to do? Okay, so and there's a different audience in general that watches cable television, which they don't get an IV, for example. Then watches this show. And so it's a chance to speak to the public. Well, you're supposed to speak to us. Do you think I'm speaking to them all the time? Come on now. Okay, so here I am speaking on yet another topic. Take it away, Dale, I guess.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. Good news in that on Tuesday night at 8:01, we're going to be joining Trish Meyer in the hallway from badcounty.com, Inside News, and we will cover the election results live. The last time that we did this, even though this board refuses to recognize this as any kind of media at all, the last time that we did this, we had over 1,000 views that first night. So this non-media outlet will be giving you the very first introduction. You're welcome to come and see for yourselves just what kind of percentage you were defeated by.
Now, why is it absolutely essential in this case that we not be recognized as media? You saw the guy sitting behind me. That's Arthur. That's Wally Hicks, legal counsel. This started with Simon Hare when he came into office. If they see, we were media. Of course we're media. Come on, give me a break. What, we've got 340,000 views. We have a nightly show. We're telling you news that even the Courier doesn't tell you. That's not hard. And we're out there on the forefront of a lot of things. We supply footage occasionally for free to the TV stations and etc. And we've got Keith Hick responding almost every week to something or other that we've said. But we can't be media, see, because if we were media, the reason they reversed themselves on this decision that of course we're media, is then media are allowed to sit quietly and listen to executive sessions. You're not allowed to report what happens there, but you can listen to executive sessions. Now, what would happen? The same thing would happen there as has happened at all the rest of the meetings. When I videotape them, and you're not allowed to videotape at those executive sessions. When I videotape them, what catch them breaking the law? And they try to say you can't videotape until we tell you can videotape. That wasn't going to work. So this is a thing that they do to say you cannot attend. You cannot be there, because then we would be in, I would probably be me, sitting in executive session, listening to them. There's really only one place that they can legally go to discuss county matters, and sometimes it's just embarrassing things, which is against the law to do. But remember, we've got Wally Hicks is watching over them, and he doesn't do that anymore. He doesn't say to them that kind of thing anymore. He does not generally represent the law as it applies in this case. Now, why do we know that's the case? Because the 3 county commissioners have been found guilty by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission of breaking the law when it comes to executive sessions. And Wally Hicks was sitting right in there with them, and now he's being investigated by the OGEC. Part of the reason for that is they said, well, every time, well, under supervision of county legal counsel. He's not holding them accountable to the law. What use is he if he's not going to hold them accountable to the law? He is the county's lawyer. He's supposed to be all of our lawyers, but he's decided now he's not going to do that. So, how did we find out? I mean, if we're not sitting in there, how did we know that things were happening? We've talked about that before. We're able to figure that out, and we were right, and the state admits that we were right. Now, it wasn't the first time they've done that, and it's certainly not the first time. I just caught Larry Graves doing it with the county commissioners again. Before a meeting, they were talking about county business. Keith Hick says, no, don't do that. And Larry Graves then stops for a moment and looks confused and then starts doing it. And Keith Hick says, no, we can't. And Larry Graves turns back to me in the camera. That's why I don't like to talk with this guy here. That's why he doesn't like to talk with me there. Because I catch him, Larry Graves, engaging in a conversation with the commissioners, and they are breaking the law. Not Larry Graves. The commissioners are breaking the law. He doesn't like that. How is there going to be a free place for people to break the law when you've got somebody that's watching you? This is why I get up and speak, to let everybody know.
When this regime is swept out of office, one of the things that we can look forward to is actually following the law. No, not the motto, I know we're breaking the law and I don't care. No, this would be following the law, and it wouldn't be also, well, we've not been found guilty of anything, and you knew all along you had been found guilty of something. And no, not that. But also the boards that are appointed by this board. They have not been putting out the proper information according to state law. They have not been following the law, Mr. Legal Counsel. And they have not been posting their minutes, and they've not been sharing with people what they're supposed to do. I'm running for office to replace Keith Hick, of course. And given the chance, if there was another candidate who's a fiscal conservative and cares about the law, what I'd say to the secretary of each of those boards is, you're going to follow the law or you no longer be the secretary of that organization. And if they continue breaking the law on a weekly or monthly basis, as the commissioners have done in the past, then I would say to the president of that board or the chairman of that board, if you don't follow the law, then we're going to take you off of the register. And if that board cannot follow the law, we're going to just stop that board from operating altogether. We will not allow the breaking of law anymore by commissioners or by the boards that have appointed by you. This is a really simple thing And it's easy to follow the law. You simply tell people what you're going to do. You give them the information, not black on black documents, which you've been warned about so many times. You just don't care because you just keep doing it anyway. So it would be transparency, really transparency, and following the law. That's what I'm running on, and we'll see if that's what people want. Look forward to seeing if what happened to a previous commissioner, Don Reedy by name, who was turned out of office with the greatest result in the history of Josephine County. We'll see if that's going to happen next.
Okay, I'm going to play another one. Might as well do them all. The ones that haven't been playing on the show. And Mike was here because, he listened to enough of me as it is. Might as well play them back. Now, I just encourage you in watching this next one. Keith Heck, they asked him on KJO, about the happiness. What are the wonderful things, the under the radar things, and that's the term that they use that they've been doing while they've been in office. Why there's lots of little things that we've done that most people don't know. And so there's just lots of too many even to spend the time to tell you about the wonderfulness of us. And one of the things that Keith Heck said that just really bothers him a lot is the people that get up at these meetings and cause a big ruckus and shake a fist and a finger, I'll use this finger, at the commissioners. I don't think that's the finger that he means. And carry signs. Carry signs. Well, let's check out and see if I'm screaming, yelling, stomping my feet. He said this before, generally having a fit, and carrying a sign. But this is the world in which Keith Heck lives.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. I fly in active service with the national organization that's tied in with the U.S. government. They don't like to be dragged into politics, so I don't mention their name. Not because it's secret, just they don't really want to be involved in politics. I can understand. So in this room recently, I got up and I made an allusion to it, saying that if you look at, it's pretty oblique, if you look at the patch on my flight suit, that you'll see that it's bordered by a gold border, which denotes active service. That's pretty much all that I said about that. And then went on to the next subject. During his protected time, where nobody can respond, Keith Heck is laughing. Keith Heck decided to accuse me of mentioning the name of the organization, which is a falsehood, said during protected time, where nobody can rebut. He also said that that organization has thrown me out, that I'm no longer a member. That's a falsehood. And during his protected time, nobody can rebut that. He also said that I was going to be in some kind of trouble for mentioning the name of the organization, which I did not do. That's a falsehood, said during Keith Heck's protected time, and nobody can rebut that. He also said that I am a 4-0, which is gibberish, because there is no such thing as a 4-0 in that organization. You might as well just call me a 2x4. It doesn't mean anything. So, nobody wants you, he says. One of the things I did in preparation for this, it's pretty easy to figure out what kind of stuff is coming next from you commissioners, if you pay attention, if anybody's paying attention, which is a good question. So what I did is I took my ID badge and I showed it to all, and I could easily have done that here, except it was during his protected time where nobody can rebut. And I showed it to all the candidates for commissioners. Something said to me, show this to all people. So that they had all seen it, including about half the people in this room, had already seen that. They knew that what he said was false.
Dale, there's not very many people in that room, but many people don't want to be seen on camera at all. That even candidates that don't want to be seen to be in a weekly business session, go figure.
So if you're prepared a little bit and you have a chance to speak, you might be able to head off things that are falsehoods. Then again, if commissioners have protected time, they can make up anything that they want, and it doesn't have to have any relationship to reality at all. That's the county in which we live. It's a bad county.
It's been happening with local media as well. Newspaper. Simply making up quotes. I mean, out of nothing. This is what Dale Matthews said. That's not what I said. And so I asked, without even holding up a sign or screaming or holding up my finger, where did you get that quote? Well, I don't have enough time to answer that question. Sure you do. Where did you get that quote? Why, questions such as yours, we need to change the subject. Mm-hmm. That's the effort that's being made to make sure that certainly, okay, so I'm the world's most evil person. Do you think that maybe you can tell us where you got the quote from? No, we'll never do that because you're making it up. That's what Keith Heck did in this situation. So that's nice. Anyway, here's the next one.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. In America, there are a number of embassies that are run by other countries, and the people who inhabit those embassies regularly employ diplomatic immunity.
Now, take a look behind me, and you'll see Jan Ford sitting next to her husband. I'll tell you a little bit about Jan Ford in a moment.
In order to fly above the laws of the United States. And they're not held accountable. Their attitude generally is that they're above all that. We have something similar to that here with the Board of County Commissioners, and it's the commissioners' protected time, during which the commissioners can say anything that they want and then shout down anyone who says, no, wait a minute, that's not true. Well, see, it's not your choice, not your chance. Well, I can sit up here and lie and say anything that I want to, and you cannot respond for at least a week. And that's what happened to me recently when Keith Heck decided to tell people just before the election that I had been thrown out of an organization. That was simply, completely not true. He also said that I was rated 4.0, which is nonsense, because there isn't any rating 4.0. I even checked with the headquarters. There's no such thing. He said, in addition to that, that there were people in that organization didn't want me in there. That's possible, but the organization itself has not asked me to leave in any way. So by saying these things, these false things, it's misuse of diplomatic immunity. It's a misuse of the commissioner's protected time to laugh about saying something which is completely false. Now, what are we supposed to do as citizens when we hear that you say something which is simply and completely not true?
Okay, so I've heard from more than one source that what Keith Heck does is he goes to his religious pals at some of the various religious organizations, churches in the area, and tells them that routinely at these meetings that people are yelling and screaming. And you just heard him say something. Well, no, you didn't hear him. I'm telling you what he said on KJO, but we'll play back that KJO thing, that they carry signs. I will submit to you that I am not screaming or yelling or gnawing on the furniture, running around the room yelling, woot, woot. I'm not carrying a sign either. But there are people who, is it something about the Gospel Rescue Mission or something about some of the local churches who will buy into the idea that criticizing your government is Satan worship? We've heard that. Or that all they need to do is hear this from Keith Heck and they believe it? From Keith Heck? So how in the world does that happen? I think I told you before that that when I was going to Parkway Christian Center, that Dennis Weber had said at a Thanksgiving meal that people were yelling out obscenities at these weekly business sessions. And I said, you shouldn't say that. because that's not true. And I don't see you at these meetings. I mean, I don't know about you going to your pastor and telling him, you know, this is not true. But I think that you have to stand up when you hear this stuff. And I said, that's not true. And when you tell people that here, you know, I am or somebody else is yelling at obscenities, mixing together with what Keith Hicks says, screaming, yelling, holding signs, yelling out obscenities, there's going to be some people who are going to believe that. It's not true. And just listen to the way that I'm speaking here. I'm not yelling at all. I'm yelling more right now than I was at the podium. It's simply not true. And what should you do if you've been the victim of what the commissioners do with their protected time? Why, I can say this and you can't respond. Ha 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 ha. And they laugh. Keith Heck literally laughs. You've heard me call it out every time he does so. I just think that's terrible myself. Now, there's a solid 20% out there who feel that Keith Heck is doing a wonderful job, and people like me deserve all the laughter that he gives them, and the lies as well. Might as well, I mean, you know, what better way is there to defeat the people who question you, especially since they're Satan worshipers? What better way is to do that than to lie about them? Because obviously they can't say anything for a week. Woohoo! It all depends on what kind of Christian you want to be, I suppose.
Denigrating the citizens. You know, the ones that you put down, now you're just the people that show up at the meetings. It does show that we care. And we do care when a commissioner or a group of commissioners decide to use their protected time to escape any kind of answers. Because I asked, you know, where'd you get that information? Why would you say that? Because it's simply not true. And I was given no answer. That is emblematic of this board. So you feel that you can just say these things and get away with them. They're not going to be in the Courier. There would be no results from any of this. Even when there were results from the OGEC about your honesty and integrity, you denied it. And you knew that they had already made that decision, and you still denied it. Then when we pointed out that the Government Ethics Commission had found you guilty, no, we haven't. Yes, you had. You had by then. And you knew it. It wasn't in the Courier either. So I would suggest that you consider not lying to us.
Now, so when this meeting was over, as we're all filing out the front door, I find myself in the lobby with two people, Jan Ford, sitting there next to her husband, and Keith Heck. And as I'm walking out, as if it's going to do any good, I say to Keith Heck, this is your second opportunity. This was your second opportunity to explain where you got that information. I am not thrown out of the organization you talked about. And Jan Ford, I'm going to have to clean this up a little bit because this is a family show. What kind of families watch this show? She says, bullshit. No, I'm speaking to Commissioner Heck, and you have bullshit. Commissioner Heck, you had an opportunity to tell people where you came up with this bullshit. She kept yelling that over and over. There's your yelling, and over again until she was yelling it at full volume. That, in my opinion, is Jan Ford is the perfect example of the kind of person who blindly follows Keith Heck. And the way to counter all arguments, all questions, all attempts to hold this old guy accountable, the way to counter that is to keep yelling bullshit, over and over and over and over again until the person asking the question can't get a word in edgewise. That's how you can defeat the people who are trying to hold government accountable. Just keep yelling it. Nice. Okay, next one. Just a couple more.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. The great thing about volunteers is they work with badcounty.com to keep track of county government that has some problems with honesty and with integrity. So I encouraged our viewers of Inside News to go on down to Galeese Road over the holiday. Go on over to Tom Pierce Road. I went to both of those places and also to the city park here. What I found doesn't match with what you're saying. It is certain that if there were, as you said in a meeting, that if there were logging trucks there, that would be a problem. There are no logging trucks there. Why would a logging truck be parked on the side of the road to get into a park? Oh, well, there could be boats parked there. Why would you park boats on the side of the road instead of taking them down to the boat ramp? There were no boats parked there. This is an obvious attempt by you to try to force people to get in there and pay that fee that you so desperately want. And a fee is a tax. It's false. I saw it with my own eyes. It's just not happening. Now, it's certainly true that if people were parked on both sides of the street all the time, that could be a problem. So you put the no parking signs on one side of the street. Or you put signs saying, no logging trucks, that you apparently seem to think that they are there. They're not there. Don't park your boat here in the middle of the street. That would be a happy, helpful thing. Remember, the reason that this started was that you had suggested that you were going to turn streets into parks. That was your original plan. All those streets leading into it would be a park. When we go to the fairgrounds, there's lots of people who don't want to pay through the nose for parking. They park along the side of the street. When we go over here for Boatnick, there are lots of people who do not want to park in some expensive place. They park along the street. We all know how to park along a street. We don't need your help to do so. All you're trying to do is force us into that priced parking. If you were really interested, if you were truly interested in keeping people safe, you would not have the parking fee in the parks, would you? You would say, come on down here and you're going to be safe. But you don't want to do that, because that would take money out of the pockets of the county. Now, these couple $100 in fees, they're going to go to the state, but you're trying to force people into this. It won't make any difference what I say or what anybody says. You're going to do it anyway. But if you're going to be giving out reasons, oh, it's the safety of the children, why don't you just say that people have to do this because it's a UFO parking lot on the street? It's just as sensible.
One of the things that the commissioners do is then they take what you say and they misquote it. And so I was talking about if you go down to the fairgrounds during fair time, that you would pay through the nose for some of the parking that's closer to the fairgrounds. Simon Hare says, well, Dale Matthews just told you to pay through the nose for parking at the parks. No. That's not what I said. So it's always easy to take something that somebody says. You recall the time when Cheryl Walker said, Dale Matthews just told you that all firefighters are pedophiles. That wasn't even trying to quote what I said. It was just totally wrong. And the purpose of that was to make me look ridiculous. I will submit that I wasn't the one that looked ridiculous from that, but it all depends, part of it depends on Keith Heck and what he says to the religious group he goes to. You won't believe what Dale Matthews just said. And there's people in this town who are willing to believe that. So what should you do? I try to maintain an even keel when I talk about this kind of stuff. I get people all the time. Sorry, this show is about Dale Matthews, big deal. And the things that I say, and combine them all into one, so you won't have to listen to this kind of stuff again. Woohoo! People ask me all the time, well, how can you put up with this week after week after week? Doesn't it make you crazy? Look, the important thing is, if I were to get crazy during this session, it'd be the last session I was at. I could never get away with what the commissioners do. I couldn't call people names like Keith Heck does. I couldn't denigrate them the way that the other two commissioners do, Cheryl Walker and Simon Hare. There's no way that I could do that. Losing your cool is the first route out the door, which they're dying to do. But in order to get to there, I have to completely lose it. And I'm not going to do that. Although I have to admit that this time I came the closest to this next one, the closest to yelling that I've been. And so you be the judge whether the subject matter is one that might tempt anybody to begin to yell. I didn't, but I came pretty close. Here's the current situation with that.
Dale Matthews, Grants Pass. The best thing about going to all your meetings is we find out who you truly are, and then we can share that with the public. At yesterday's meeting, there was announced a chance to help out widows of police officers and veterans that are killed in the process of doing their duty, not afterwards from some kind of other illness, but a police officer, for example, in the performance of his or her duty that is killed in action. And what can we possibly do to make it a little easier for that widow when faced with her property taxes? Keith Heck objected. Well, you know, in these days, he said, with the way that society is going, you can't really tell if that's truly his spouse or not. Maybe it's just someone that lives with him. This is the problem? That the widow of someone who is killed in action is going to try to cheat the county government? That's where the blame is now placed? Where does one come up with this kind of thinking? At the Gospel Rescue Mission? Perhaps, from the motto, I know we're breaking the law and I don't care? Is everybody now, are you surrounded by nothing but cheaters? Really, where's your heart? A widow of someone killed in action, in performance of their duty, and you're going to hesitate? Well, this could be a big scam. No. And as the assessor pointed out, well, she can only really think of one person that this might apply to now, and maybe a maximum of 4 or 5. Really, is this going to bankrupt the county? It is a bankruptcy of integrity. It's a bankruptcy of having a feeling for the community. Just as a political matter, it's crazy. So you're going to buck up against this and say, well, we don't really want to know if we want to help the widow of someone killed in the performance of their duty. It's astounding to me. So we're going to continue watching you till you're driven out of office. Disappointed.
Well, that's my contribution to the public discourse at the weekly business session. Have a happy evening.